Okay, now we're going to talk about topic 1.5, which is developments in Africa. So, starting off again with cultural and religious ideology, which is always high frequency, especially from period one. Similar to what we see with the Americas, we have animism. So, again, this is a foundational belief system in many African societies. They too believed that there was a spiritual connection between nature and ancestors. Islam is going to be a very high potential frequency topic for this region because uh, it was one of the main things that was being spread through the Trans Saharan Trade Network, and the fact that it wasn't military based, it was merchant kind of driven, not on purpose. That's what makes it kind of unique, and so that's why it stands out as a high frequency topic here. They did blend Islam with local traditions, so it wasn't practiced the exact same everywhere, but the core Islamic beliefs were similar. So we see some slight syncretism here, but there were really no new religions or anything that developed because of that. In the way of syncretism and cultural diffusion, the mixing of Islamic and traditional African beliefs did exist, but again, there was really no new religion that we saw like Neo-Confucianism or Sikhism or anything like that. But if you are given an Ibn Battuta document, um, a lot of times this is one of those topics that will come up if you do get one of his documents, where he was living or staying with an African village, with an African family. And you guys read a couple of these at the beginning of the year. From his writings, we do know quite a bit about the belief system. And so, as he's staying with them, he does identify and recognize, oh, this is similar to Islam. And we know that Islam had spread to these different societies because of his documentation and records. For political systems and governance, for Africa, we have kinship networks, which is pretty important for Africa during this time period. These were family based political organizations in much smaller societies than what we've seen in other locations around the world. There was a segmentary lineage line. Power was distributed among families, clan groups, tribes, and then later into small kingdoms. So there was just this kind of sequence where you're talking about family and then clan, which brings some other families together. And then from that, you have larger tribes. And then eventually, we will see some kingdoms develop regionally. It's not going to be everywhere, but it is going to be regional. Empire building in West Africa is a high frequency topic. For these are the really the big examples that we have for examples of major states or empires. And this, of course, was West Africa. So we have large centralized states that control trade routes. The two big ones are going to be Mali and Songhai for this region. For cultural and intellectual developments, Islamic scholarship is right up there. We because of the spread of Islam, centers of learning will develop throughout West Africa. We have mosques that will be put up. Timbuktu is high frequency topic because it is evidence for everything we've discussed so far. So Timbuktu was the major center of trade and education, which demonstrates the profound impact that Islam will have in West African societies. In addition, we see the adoption of the Arabic language, which was a given if you're studying the Quran. So Arabic was the language that will eventually be used for anything involving religion, trade, or scholarship in West Africa. Economic systems, Trans Saharan Trade Network was a critical factor to their economy. It connected West Africa to North Africa, and then, of course, beyond into Afro-Eurasia. The gold salt trade was the major economic entity that existed, especially in West Africa. And because of that, we do see this topic right here, gold salt trade, and the control that Mali and Songhai had over it. This appears most often as a multiple choice question topic. For Indian Ocean trade, we know that there was involvement with the Swahili city states, which connected them to India, Arabia, and Southeast Asia. In addition, with the Trans Saharan Trade Network, we have caravans. For this one, we're utilizing camels mainly. Camels made desert trade possible because of their ability to go long distances without needing water. So they're very much going to be used. We're going to see the development of camel saddles and uh, um, stirrups because of the fact that the camels were an animal that could really do a lot of the heavy lifting for the merchants in the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. Significant people to know: Mansa Musa is the number one most tested person in this unit, not just for developments in Africa, like in the entirety of Unit 1, if you are going to see a question about one person in particular, it's going to be Mansa Musa. So a lot of that has to do with the fact that if you look at the CED, which you've heard me talk about before, if you look at the curriculum guide for AP College Board, um, there are 10 specific people that are mentioned in the CED. Mansa Musa is one of them. So because of that, he is a high test. There's a high test probability that you could see something about him. He was the wealthy ruler of Mali who famously distributed gold along his pilgrimage to Mecca. This shows the power and wealth that he, as the leader of Mali, had. It also demonstrated the Islamic influence because he was Muslim. He was making this pilgrimage as part of the Hajj. And so there's a lot you can do with Mansa Musa, which is why he is highly tested. The image that I showed you guys in class, where it shows him sitting Indian style. He's holding a scepter made of gold. He's got a crown made of gold. And then you kind of see this, it looks like a trade network in the background with small icons that, like mosques and other stuff. That is one of the number one most used image concerning Mansa Musa that we typically see on the AP exam. Sundiati is the next person. He established Mali as a major power. So Sundiati will be the first, Mansa Musa later on. I think I've already told you guys this, but Sundiati is the true Lion King. So this was the man that the story of the Lion King was actually based off of. Major states and empires. This is very important for West Africa. We've got the two big ones, so Mali and Songhai. Ghana would provide you with context, but if you're going to get a question about a significant empire during this time period in Africa, in West Africa, it's going to be the Mali Empire. Their wealth was sustained through the gold salt trade. We know they had a lot of Islamic influence through control of the Trans Saharan Trade Network. Timbuktu is going to be their intellectual center, and their famous ruler, Mansa Musa, is again one of the most frequently tested topics on the AP exam. Ghana, again, was this earlier empire. It also controlled the gold salt trade, but it will diminish, and eventually the Mali Empire will take over. For East Africa, we have the Swahili coast or the Swahili city-states, high frequency topic, especially as it pertains to Indian Ocean trade and syncretism with those diasporic communities. So those are the big key terms. You see something in Swahili city-state, you want to make sure you are using that terminology. So you've got the Indian Ocean Trade Network, you've got the blend of African and Islamic culture, so we've got syncretism. But the big word you want to use is going to be diasporic community. That's a major thing that they want you guys to be familiar with for as it pertains to the Swahili coast. Swahili, the language itself, is also another form of syncretism. It's a blend of Bantu and Arabic. So the language itself is really demonstrates this interconnectedness at the time through the Indian Ocean Trade Network. In Southern Africa, there's one empire that does appear often, and that is Great Zimbabwe. They were a powerful trading state, and we have evidence of a highly complex African society here. We know that they traded with the Swahili city-states, so a lot of times those city-states would get items from Great Zimbabwe that could only be extracted from the interior of Africa. And so they would trade with the merchants from the East Coast, and they were a secondary part or leg of the Indian Ocean Trade Network. So pretty interesting there. The one thing that you're going to see with Great Zimbabwe, and I'm going to add this to it, is, where should I put that? Oh, the wall. Okay, so one of the biggest things that we see with Great Zimbabwe is the construction of this wall. This is an image you're gonna get. You would get an image of the wall itself. There were a lot of questions concerning the wall that they constructed. What was the purpose? If you generally think about any time historically that walls have been constructed, whether you're talking about the Great Wall of China or the Berlin Wall, there's really only one answer, and it was to keep the citizens in and to prevent outsiders from making it in. So you've got maintaining power over the people, preventing them from leaving and escaping to some degree, but also to keep outsiders out. And so we can only assume that that was the purpose for the construction of Great Zimbabwe. The bigger thing, though, that has appeared in the past for this wall is how it was constructed technologically. There was no mortar or pestle that held this wall together. Every brick that was stacked on top of another brick was a fraction, tiny fraction smaller than the brick that was below it. So what that did was it ensured that there would not be a collapse of this wall, and that the weight was proportionate to making sure that the weight was heavier at the bottom and lighter at the top. So high technological understanding to be able to construct a wall that in parts still stand today in the ruins, knowing that there was nothing that held the bricks together. If there is anything you're going to study for developments in Africa, you need to make sure that you're focusing on these topics here. So Trans Saharan Trade, Mansa Musa, Mali Empire, Gold Salt Trade, Swahili Coast, and its link to the Indian Ocean Trade Network and Islam, how it spread and how it led to a lot of syncretism in the areas that it did spread in Africa. Typically, how you see these questions on the AP exam for multiple choice, you could see something like, well, what was the main purpose of Trans-Saharan trade? And that's going to be the gold salt exchange. For the SAQ, explain one effect of Islam in Africa. There's a lot you can do here. It would be some kind of thematic effect, though. They would have to pick something. So it could be trade, it could be scholarship, it could be syncretism. It just depends on what theme it is they're going to ask you. So explain one intellectual effect that Islam had in Africa, or explain one cultural effect that Islam had in Africa. So depending on whatever the theme is that they would present to you, that would dictate how you answer it. But there's a lot you can do with those. For LEQ and DBQ topics, you could see something involving the impact of trade on the growth and construction of these states, not the building of them actually, but how they grew and how they legitimized rule, and maintained that power. Also, the spread and adoption of Islam, and finally, religious regional differences, especially when we look at West Africa and those empires, and East Africa that was involved in the Indian Ocean Trade Network, whereas Mali and Songhai and Ghana were involved in the Trans Saharan Trade Network. So a lot of interesting comparison you can do between the two, because there are similarities and there are a lot of differences as well. Big takeaways, just understand Africa was deeply shaped by trade networks, in particular to the Trans-Saharan and Indian Ocean. Islam spread but blended with local traditions. So it wasn't practiced exactly the same by every single group in Africa. Wealth and power was greatly tied to control of the trade routes, and the diverse political systems like empires, city-states, and kinship groups were very different comparatively on the African continent based off of how they were functioning. The next topic we will examine is 1.6. This is developments in Europe. After that, we will be done with our Unit 1 review.